And now we would like to welcome our second presentation from school number 164 from Zelenogorsk, Russia. I think they're already up here.
Dear host, participants, and guests of the CIF conference.
Let me introduce Yana Novoselskaya.
My co-presenter is Arina Mazhelova. We are students of Gymnasia number 164 from Zelenogorsk, Russia. We are going to present our research on US-Russian cooperation perspectives in nuclear risks reduction.
Russia and the USA were the first two countries to manufacture and test nuclear weapons, and they are still the owners of the biggest nuclear arsenals. That is why we strongly believe in the joint power of cooperation between these two countries in all the spheres, non-proliferation and disarmament included.
Our presentation will address the following points: positive experience of US-Russian cooperation in the past, dangerous consequences of pursuing economic profit without evaluating the political impact, necessity of the cooperation in scientific sphere, responsibility of scientists and countries developing nuclear programs, responsibility of the humanity to the future generations for preserving the earth and the civilization in general, nuclear weapon states' duty to other countries in the non-proliferation regime.
Although the map of the nuclear world has not been altered greatly for the last decade, the so-called non-proliferation climate has worsened just in front of our eyes, bringing the consequences which will be felt for a long time in the future. Having these questions in mind, we started preparing for this conference. Being Russians, certainly we were interested in the relations between our country and the United States of America. Our aim was to analyze various spheres and results of cooperation between our two countries and to put together recommendations to Russia and the USA.
Past stories of success make us optimistic. One of the brightest examples of US-Russian non-proliferation disarmament cooperation was the agreement of US-Russian highly enriched uranium agreement, signed in 1993, only 3 years after the collapse of the USSR. Thanks to this project, both parties could increase their wealth considerably. Namely, Russia received huge monetary benefit from supplying the USA with fuel, which in it turned to save the USA from its production. 10% of US electric power came from it. Unfortunately, in 2013, Russia refused to prolong this agreement, referring to its domestic needs. But US-Russian economic cooperation still goes on, only on the level of individual companies. Referring to it, we can assume that such an agreement can be renewed involving other nuclear weapon countries. Resumption of the operation of the agreement can strongly influence other participating countries' wealth.
One moment, please. Excuse me, there is something.
But this demands efforts and means a lot of work.
That was an example of successful US-Russian cooperation. However, there are some situations where these countries' views differ, and it can complicate the process of non-proliferation and disarmament. For instance, Iran signed the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action in 2015, and almost all the sanctions were lifted due to the obligation of government of Iran to curtail the nuclear program. Notwithstanding, President Trump's administration withdrew from the nuclear deal in 2018 and imposed sanctions again. One of the reasons may be to stop the access of Iran to the oil market and allow the US partner Saudi Arabia to take the biggest stake of it. Russia is against it. Unfortunately, currently more and more political decisions are driven by the economical reasons. This decision of the American administration can destroy long time and hard work in the field of non-proliferation. It is understandable, pleasure is one of the main drives of humanity, but still each country should act according to conscience to achieve the common good. In our case, it's complete nuclear disarmament.
As we see, one of the pretexts to withdraw from the joint agreement was connected with the fear that Iran could become one more nuclear weapon country. As we know, apart from official nuclear weapon states, non-NPT nuclear weapon possessors are those which are able to impair the stability. There are 4 of them. They are India, Pakistan, Israel and North Korea. All these countries have either never joined NPT or have withdrawn from it. However, India adopted the policy of no first use of nuclear weapons.
Sometimes US-Russian positions about these 4 countries coincide, as their opinion about solving problems with North Korea. The White House even verified approaches with the Kremlin on the issue of normalizing relations with the North Korean side before the Hanoi summit. However, American and Russian opinions about other non-NPT nuclear weapon possessors are divided. In a nutshell, Russia and the USA are competing to have a greater influence on these countries. These countries possess really dangerous knowledge. That is why their government should have strong and sensible character. Otherwise, wrong decisions can cause a catastrophe.
It is a fact that countries possessing nuclear weapons pose a danger to the whole humanity, consequently assuming obligations. However, scientists who work at such disastrous weapons take even more responsibility. Unfortunately, some dangerous incidents are known to us when actions of scientists led to proliferation of nuclear weapons. We all know about A.Q. Khan, one of the creators of nuclear weapon in Pakistan, whose network illegally sold nuclear weapon technologies to North Korea and Iran for the sake of commercial benefit.
This immoral act affected general security, non-proliferation and disarmament processes. If this illegal commerce had been prevented, probably the international arena would look different nowadays. A.Q. Khan's actions led to crisis of non-proliferation of nuclear weapons in Asia and in the East, and caused new problems in the international relations. Russia and the USA have negative attitude to the consequences of actions of A.Q. Khan.
Some countries' political decisions can slow down the disarmament process too. They do it by refusing signing or ratifying international treaties. One of the examples of this situation is the Comprehensive Nuclear Test Ban Treaty. Unfortunately, this agreement still has not become effective, as not all countries stated in the agreement signed or ratified it. Russia and the USA can strongly influence the choices of other countries. Russia ratified CTBT in August 2000. After its ratification, a lot of countries were convinced to sign and later ratify this agreement. But the USA still has not ratified CTBT. This approach affects other countries' decisions whether to support or not the treaty.
The Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons has been one of the latest steps in disarmament. Unfortunately, it hasn't become effective yet. It has been signed by 70 countries, but ratified only by 22. Russia and the USA often speak about disarmament and elimination of nuclear arms, but they don't move toward disarmament. Their decision not to sign the treaty strongly influences other nuclear or non-nuclear countries, slowing down the disarmament process.
The most recent crisis concerning many countries of the world is connected with the bilateral INF treaty. Both the USA and Russia declared their withdrawal from this agreement less than a month ago. Many experts believe this decision can lead to the beginning of the new Cold War or even worse, a nuclear conflict. The INF treaty constrains scientific development of intermediate range and short range missiles. If the countries want to avoid the worst consequences, they have to try to solve this problem through a dialogue. Science without humanity can lead only to a disaster.
No. It wasn't at the end. If all the signatory parties to the NPT, which is the cornerstone of the non-proliferation regime, are pledged to Article 6, the present unstable situation could have been avoided. First, we mean all 5 nuclear weapon countries. They declare their willingness to overcome disagreement in order to achieve security and stability, but in fact do little for it, if nothing.
Actually, a very important dialogue was started after a long period of absence of any negotiations. At the end of February 2019, the President of the USA, Donald Trump, met North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. It was a great step in normalizing relations with North Korea. However, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Russia, Sergei Lavrov, wanted to remind that the USA should sacrifice their interests and lift sanctions if North Korea agrees to stop nuclear testing. The failure of this meeting makes us comprehend that all misunderstandings between the countries can be left behind only in the case of hard work and reciprocal concession. Each country has to be ready to sacrifice something for normalizing relations with other countries. Compromise in negotiations cannot be achieved at the expense of one party only. Worshipping nuclear weapon-free world isn't enough to get it without sacrifice.
Politicians are like pilots of the airplane. All the power is concentrated in their hands. If they are unwilling to cooperate with their tower or their crew, a lot of lives are in danger. Conferences are a great opportunity for governments to solve problems. Unfortunately, not all countries use this opportunity. Sometimes decisions are made not for moral reasons, but for getting profit. Compliance with the obligations must be the main principle for all actors in the nuclear field, and all the guarantees must be firm for reaching compromises. For example, the NPT Review Conference of 2015 failed to bring us to a more secure world. The participating countries shouldn't repeat this mistake in 2020.
The USA and Russia have a good history and experience in cooperation in the field of disarmament and non-proliferation. You can see our bilateral agreements on the slide. All these agreements have had or could have had positive influence on the relations of the countries, but unfortunately not all of them become effective. All the nuclear states should negotiate to keep our world safe for future generations. Otherwise, unprincipled or opportunistic politics can lead to a disaster instead of a nuclear-free world.
The USA and Russia have already coped with similar crises, and if they follow some recommendations, they will be able to restore the relations. Here are some of them. Adopt a no first use policy. Make nuclear weapon deterrence provision only. Guarantee the security and safety for their allies. Build the international security policy on dialogue and transparency, reducing the role of nuclear weapons in it. Negotiate and adopt bilateral strategic arms control agreement, which will enable both countries to reduce their nuclear forces. Call for the banning the production of fissile materials used for creating nuclear weapons. Strengthen the role of CTBTO, the IAEA, all major international conferences containing non-proliferation. Oh, sorry. Spoiler. Cooperate with all countries, nuclear or not, to make sure that every state possessing nuclear weapons or materials used for its creation provides best security practices.
Humanity has proved it is capable of learning on the previous mistakes. When challenged, people tend to turn to successful past experience or trustworthy experts. Often we find words of wisdom from philosophers and scholars. What are all famous quotes but common sense expressed in a convincing, understandable, generalized form? Here is what we found in works of Mahatma Gandhi, the follower of non-violent civil disobedience.
In human society, all violence can be traced back to these 7 recurrent blunders: wealth without work, pleasure without conscience, knowledge without character, commerce without morality, science without humanity, worship without sacrifice, and politics without principle.
If we keep it in mind, we believe that humanity will be able to avoid a nuclear catastrophe. The role of the US and Russia in it is difficult to underestimate. Hopefully, the younger generation of activists and politicians will be able to persuade their countries to be responsible players in the time of international turbulence and rapid change, especially in the field of reduction of nuclear risks.
Thank you for your attention. All the resources are given on the slides. Now we are ready to answer your questions.